Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the memorial service of Mr. Stephen R. Ballis. We welcome those of you who are online and those of you who are here. Please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off, not to disturb the sacred ceremony. Rabbi Jeffrey Weil will be officiating at this time.
In the Bible, when something sad would happen, when something calamitous would happen, when there was a shock, our biblical forebears really did two things. They raised their voices, as they say in the biblical idiom, they raised their voices and they cried. And they also did an act of kriya, an act of tearing, to expose, in a sense, their vulnerable and wounded hearts. That is what we will do now for the mourners, the halachic mourners who are here. Please rise, the four of you, with the ribbons. For the children, Stacey and Debbie, it is over their hearts, and for Sister Sue and for Elizabeth, it is on the other side. And you'll recite this blessing after me, acknowledging God as the judge of truth. Baruch atah Adonai, Dayan ha'emet. Praise are you, eternal God, the judge of truth. You may be seated. Adonai, ma Adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'tichashvehu. Adam lehevel dema, yamav kitzel over baboki atzitz v'chalaf la'erev v'vel v'yavesh. Tashev enosh adaka v'tomer shuvu v'nei Adam. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you would even be mindful of us? We're all of us just a breath. We're all of us just a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning it shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening of all of our lives it fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu, B'nai Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise, and would that we understood whither we go from here. For when we die, we carry nothing with us, not our riches, not our glory. But God, you say, Shmor Tam or Yashar, mark the wholehearted, behold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find peace. Friends, today we gather to remember one, celebrate the life of one, say farewell to one who was Tam v'Yashar. He was wholehearted and he was upright. He was grand. He was giving. He was so loving. Stephen Ballis. Our scriptures have something to say at all the times of our lives, times that are full of joy. May they increase. And during the sad times as well. At a time like this, we read the 23rd Psalm, which you'll find in our handouts. I will read it first in Hebrew, and then we can read it together in English. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bino desha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'ma'an shemo, gam ki elech b'geit salmavet lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtechad mishantecha hema inachamuni, Ta'aroch l'fanai shulchan neged zorai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yodefuni kol yemei chaya, v'shafti b'veit Adonai lo'orech yamim. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Esa inai el harim me'ain yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shomayim ba'aretz. I lift my eyes unto the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from the eternal God, the one who makes heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector does not slumber. Behold, the Shomer Yisrael, the protector of Israel, neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian and your protection at your right hand. May the sun not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. May God guard you from all harm. May God guard your soul, your going out and coming forth forever. The third chapter of Kohelet, we know it also as Ecclesiastes, presents this idea that everything in life is unfolding in a way that it ought to unfold. That is certainly a challenging idea at different times in our lives, particularly when loss happens, particularly when there's great sadnesses, when things don't make sense. But our tradition guides us or nudges us in that direction, that everything happens at an appropriate time, whether we understand that or not. L'kol zman ve'et lecho chefetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time when we must refrain from our embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time to speak. And so this is an appropriate time to speak words in tribute of Stephen Ballis and his life. In this week's Torah portion, we're at the end of the book of Exodus, and it features, of course, Moses, but it also features his brother Aaron. Aaron is invested as the high priest here. That happens a couple of times in Torah, but now the Mishkan, the tabernacle, has been completed, and Aaron is stood before the entire community, and he is invested as the Kohen Gadol, the first high priest. He's got his special vestments, his special clothes on. He looks grand. He commands respect. He is esteemed, noticed, fulfilling now and for the rest of his life this essential and valuable role within the world of the Israelites. Stephen Ballis also was esteemed, and he was noticed. He was a prominent figure. People knew who he was, and they respected him as he respected them, for he did as well valuable work within his community. He engaged in these projects, these grand projects for the betterment of his people, the Jewish people, yes, but also the Chicago people, regardless of their backgrounds. But truly there is more to Stephen Ballis than that prominence, more to him than those significant projects in business and philanthropy, in the Jewish world, these organizational worlds, educational world, all of that critically important, of course. But just as Aaron of Torah was really known, according to our tradition, for his relational skills, Aaron was known for how he related to other people, in particular seeking comity or seeking peace between people, so was Stephen known as one who cared for other people, for his obvious love, his evident and abundant love for others. Strangers, yes, friends, those in need, those with less, and of course his own loving family. Stephen Ballis was full of love. He brought love. He engendered it. And the sorrow now of this loss is deep and painful. He was Chicago-born and raised, son of Dayton and Johnny, brother to Sue and to Sally, may her memory be for blessing. The family lived in Lakeview on Oakdale, among their tight-knit extended family. In fact, there was family right across the hall. He attended Nettlehorst and then Lakeview High School before transferring to the lab school at University of Chicago. He was strong, and he excelled in the shot put. He was a record holder, of course, in the shot puts. He was a true Chicagoan. He valued the family's season's tickets to the Bears and later to the Cubbies, just as he loved Vienna beef, hot dogs, and Manny's. I guess by your laughter, really loved them. He went to Boston University. He majored in having fun. He went to law school 6 weeks. This was a time, as a young man, of fleeting commitments, I would say, for Stephen Ballis. But other commitments endured, of course. Other commitments endured. One in particular. He was set up with a young woman, a friend of Sally's at University of Wisconsin. This was Elizabeth. They went out in, I think the first date was May 1968. On that first date, one talked more than the other. Stephen talked a lot, but Elizabeth felt it was definitely worth a second date and a third and so on. And then in August, at a campground with friends, they were suddenly engaged. Some may have found this to be impetuous, the timing, too soon for this young couple. But as I was thinking about that, I was thinking of the Buddy Holly song, Well, All Right, which is such a beautiful song. Buddy Holly sings, "These foolish kids can't be ready for the love that comes their way." But they were ready, Stephen and Elizabeth. And indeed, the song continues, "Well, all right, we will live and love with all our might." And that is exactly what Elizabeth and Stephen did. They lived and loved in a mighty way. And they created a partnership, a family, a home of laughter, of learning, of love. As Elizabeth said, in love my whole life. The young couple moved around a little bit, but soon settled in Lincoln Park, where they remained and raised Stacey and Deborah. Stephen worked for a decade in the family insurance business, Ballis and Ballis, but he, in his dynamic way, he charted his own course in real estate, creative, dynamic, and he wanted to make an impression on the neighborhood and the city. And he was among the early developers along Clybourne. He focused on the whole on planned development that yielded results, multifaceted positive results for neighborhoods. Elizabeth also entered real estate, she in brokerage, he in development. Stephen was deeply involved in the near North Side and later very committed to, worked on the redevelopment of Bronzeville. He took I think it's fair to say, a holistic view of his work. There was the commitment to not only the building per se, but to the neighborhood, to the schools, of course, as well. He fought for school desegregation. He helped create and improve and develop schools, Lincoln Park High School, the LaSalle Language Academy. His good work was noted by the mayor, Mayor Daley, who appointed him to the Board of Education in 1989. During that time, he wrote an influential paper, the SAVE program, a progressive reform plan for schools. he got some of this, came by it honestly. Like his parents were deeply involved in community work, especially Jewish involvements. And Stephen served as board president of JCFS and much more. He did so much, and whatever he did, all in. So all in fact, that at times he would reach a point at which, this also, by the way, coincided a little bit with the economy, so it was convenient in that way, but he'd reach a point at which gainful employment might recede for him and volunteer work would ascend for him, would become more central. All in, with his creative mind and his big, generous heart and his enthusiasm. No wonder testimonials have streamed in, including from those who crossed paths with him many years ago. I'll share a couple of them. The first person, this is in quotes, the first person to welcome my mother and me as we were registering for school at LaSalle was Mr. Ballis. He was volunteering that morning to help get the new year off to a good start. I will never forget how he embraced a young kid from the far south side. And another, he is the guy you want to be around. Damn, I enjoyed him. He was a worldly, accomplished, smart, enjoyable man. He made a difference in the world. And one more. It was hard to narrow it down to 3, by the way. One more. He helped me understand what family can be. Had it not been for the family Ballis, I'd never have demanded more for myself and created my family. What an extraordinary legacy all of that is. And so as effective and grand and great and influential he was to those outside the home and to his projects outside the home, Stephen Ballis was all the more so inside the home, in his home, with this beloved family. To Stacey and to Deborah, as kids, we'll hear from them in a few minutes, he was a present dad. This is at a time when not all dads were so present, but he was there for them in the diverse ways that they needed him. As they are diverse, different, he was responding appropriately. He taught them. He shared his joyful lust for life with them, that is apparent in this family, and his great laughter as well. The Ballises had dinner together nightly. They flipped a switch to silent the phone. Stacey and Debbie's friends at times when they first met Mr. Ballis may initially have been intimidated at times by this man, but it did not take long for them to figure him out. They knew what it was all about. It was about the warmth and the relationship. It was about the love. It was definitely about the kibitzing. It was about the occasional, or perhaps more than occasional, dark humor, a hallmark perhaps. These qualities of his, of Stephen's, and indeed of the whole family, were appreciated by so many, including, for sure, Peggy, the Ballis' bonus daughter. Stephen's active mind brought him to all sorts of interests as well, side interests, hobbies. He dove into pursuits. He'd buy the gadgets, think the telescope and binoculars, think painting. Eventually, he'd move on to something else. But again, the key interests, the central things they endured: family, the farm, the family at the farm, with friends, those 5 other couples and families on those 40 acres by the pond. For this urban family, this city family, the farm was quiet, it was peaceful, it offered you a place to center, to be in the midst of nature, to laugh, to gather. And that is what you did recently. You gathered as Stephen Ballis approached the end of his life. Yes, he possessed, as you said, those Jewish 9 lives, which is double, it's 18 lives. That's high, and that's luck. 18 lives, a lucky number. And Stephen Ballis was indeed lucky. Basof, in the end, how lucky he was, surrounded at the farm by loved ones. Elizabeth, his beshert, his true love, for more than half a century. Stacey and Deborah, Bill and Andy. And here today are so many others. Longtime friends, of course, we'll hear from some of them as well. Grandchildren from various coasts, those of whom he was so proud, Oliver, Kalie, and Quincy. Later in Torah, we will read about how Aaron, the high priest, died in the wilderness among his community, yes, but he never reached the ultimate home, nor did Moses. They didn't reach the promised land. Stephen Ballis, this generous and loving man, he died at the farm among his people. He was blessed. He was home. Elizabeth shared with me the following verse from Khalil Gibran in his beautiful book, The Prophet. I share with you. When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delights. May the delights and the smile and the laughter and the love and the light of Stephen Ballis shine abundantly with you. Zichrono livracha. May his memory be for blessing. Amen. I call forward first George Heiser.
Dear Elizabeth, Stacey, Deborah, today we've come to honor Stevie, and we've come to remember him. So let me start with a little story. In the spring of 1965, my last year in college, a friend of mine, known to many of you, Tony Barash, and I happened to have lunch. And Tony looked at me and said, "George, what are you doing for this summer?" And I said, "Tony, believe it or not, I'm not doing anything, nothing." And he said, "Why don't you come with me to this wonderful little place, a summer camp in central Wisconsin called, on Lake Mendota, called Camp Indianola." And I said, "Well, Tony, since I have nothing to do, that is a splendid idea." So we did it. And little did I know what was going to happen. That summer at bucolic Camp Indianola was wonderful. Made many friends, had a lot of fun. Money wasn't great, but that's okay. We did all kinds of things. We'll tell the stories later about what happened. But a truly extraordinary thing happened, and that is that I met two guys who became friends of mine for the rest of my life. One of them was Stephen, and the other was Henry Galt. And who knew that friendship began 57 years ago? How did we all get this old? And continued for 57 years. Quite remarkable. How did that happen? As Steve began to go through these very difficult, trying times these last several weeks, I began to think about that. What caused this magnetism? What was Steve bringing to the table? What was there about his character, his capacity for friendship? And I was fascinated by this, and I began to say, these are important lessons. I loved all the factual stuff. I never knew that Stevie was a shot putter, but I was very impressed with that. Never knew that. And I began to think about all the characteristics that he had. And I'd like to share a couple of them with you. First, I would note, Stevie was smart. And we all like to be surrounded by smart people as we grow older, people like Steve. I knew he was smart, but I didn't really know how smart he was until about 1969 or so, and I'd been invited to a party, and Steve was there, and he walked over and he said, "Georgie, I'd like you to introduce you to Elizabeth, my wife." And I looked up at this beautiful, gracious person who so clearly adored Steve. And I thought to myself, Steve, you are a very smart guy. And that was a very smart decision. And of course, it was the best decision of Steve's life. Now, enough said about Steve's intelligence. He was there. I guess all deep friendships are rooted somehow in loyalty, and Stephen was a loyal friend, a committed friend. If you were his friend, he was your friend forever. He was the man. Early on in Chicago, when I first came out here to practice law, I didn't know really anyone, and I knew Steve and a couple of other people, Henry. and Steve grabbed me by the shoulder one day, and he began to introduce me into the Ballis orbit. And it was a wonderful family, as you've described. And I got to know over a period of time his parents, his grandparents, wonderful sisters, his delightful Uncle Pat, wherever Uncle Pat is, Uncle Mindy, who used to take Steve and me to work. And I was a young lawyer. I was going in at 8:30. I don't think I could do that anymore. And but he brought me into this circle of faux Ballises in a way that I was very touched by. It helped me at a time, and probably I was more touched and moved than I ever let on with Steve. He was just that kind of person. He knew the needs that we all had, and he reached out and he grabbed us when we needed it. Steve was the kind of guy who loved people. And you see, I'm not talking about all his accomplishments. I'm talking about his capacity for friendship. He loved people. He loved to talk, loved to laugh, loved to share his opinions even when we didn't want to hear them. And his opinions were manifest on everything and unshakable. And if any of you know Steve or knew Steve well, you knew that there was never a Ballis opinion that he moved away from. Not a word, not a nuance. If Steve articulated an opinion, it was gone. But we loved being with him. We loved the laughter. We loved sparring with him. And we always came back for more because it was fun. And Steve was a wonderful, fun person. He was an interested person, and by that I mean he wanted to know about us. And that's, as I grow old, I'm now in my late 50s, and he wanted to know all about us. And this rare character or quality of his wanted to really know about what we were doing, what our spouses were doing, what our children were doing, were we okay? And he listened carefully. And from time to time, he offered astute advice to us. He would sit down and very quietly and very gently provide counsel. He was not quite as professional as the doctor's Galt over here, but he was good. I considered him my rabbi. And for an old Catholic boy who grew up in central Missouri, I was not entirely sure what that meant, but he was my rabbi, and I sat at his knee for advice. And I'm not sure that you sit at the rabbi's knee, but in any event, Steve was a tough guy, and that became so apparent in the last few months of his life. And as you said, he had the Jewish tradition is 18 lives. I think you're wrong. I think Steve had somewhere between 25 and 35 lives. Most of us have 2 or 3. Steve fought so many battles during his lifetime, and at the end, they were just coming after him day after day. Boom, boom, boom. But he never complained. I was always shocked by that. There was never a woe is me moment. As Michael and Henry knows, it was very difficult ever to pull information from the guy as to what was really going on physically, because he didn't think that was something that we needed to know. He didn't want to bring us into that orbit of suffering. And he would say, "How are you doing today?" "Fine. I'm fine." And It was extraordinary to me because his suffering was almost unlike any I've seen, and it happened for so many years and in so many ways. And there was this Job-like quality about him that was very impressive. And at one point I said in the last several weeks to Elizabeth, I said, you know, this guy is very tough, and he is the toughest blankety blank guy I think I've ever known who's faced all these maladies that he's had. And Elizabeth looked at me and rolled her eyes and said, you ought to see him at night. So, not entirely sure what she meant, but I think I understand. So perhaps the mantle of Job, my dear friend, goes on your shoulders as well. And maybe you were as tough as Steve was through all of this. So as I look back, perhaps the glue that kept us all in Steve's orbit, this deep orbit of friendship, was his kindness, his gentleness, his great decency. Till I read his obituary, even I had not known about the depth and breadth of his charitable efforts over the years. Steve made a contribution. He helped those who had less than he had. I love the story about meeting the little boy. He was a good and decent man, but most of all, he was a loving man. He adored you, Elizabeth, loved you, Stacey and Deborah, Bill and Andy, extolled your virtues and accomplishments to high heaven and sometimes beyond that. He could be very euphoric about your good sides, but he was always grateful for that wonderful family he had. So Elizabeth, Stacey, Deborah, Bill, and Andy, we will miss Steve always. But what a good life he had. And aren't we lucky to have shared it with him?
Thank you. Michael Srilovitz.
It's hard to follow my eloquent attorney. Back in 1970, I went in business with my father. And 2 years before that, Stephen joined Ballis and Ballis, formerly Pacelli and Ballis. And our fathers got together and said, we should get together. Young married couple, get together. Back in those days, insurance companies gave out calendars. You were lucky if you got in a calendar from an insurance company, but we got a better gift. We got Stephen and Elizabeth as a gift. An everlasting gift for over 50 years. We still feel that love like the same day in Arlington Heights. When I brought Stephen that mountain ash tree, then he realized that he had to go back to the city, and that was it. Stephen, this loss is not just a loss of a friend, family member. It's loss of is Stephen. Stephen was an entity unto itself. He was a noun. He was Stephen. Look in the dictionary, he's there. You look up under Stephen, and it's exactly what George and the rabbi was saying. That's exactly who he is. Because in his obituary, he said, his advice and his wish for people was, live life the fullest, be kind, be charitable to the less fortunate, but also, he said, if you can. That meant that Stephen meant well for you and for the person you were giving to. He wanted to make sure you're well so you can give again and be kind. We've traveled with Stephen from riding elephants in Botswana to Israel, to Italy, all over the world, and those memories we'll never, ever forget. Talk about the farm. Going the roundabout, going down Spring Grove Road, seeing the American flag, turning right, it just put a joy in my heart. Our whole family spent their growing years at the farm, picking apples, biting fish in Lake Yucky. I mean, it was just growing up again. We say, may his life be for a blessing, but being his friend, that was the real blessing. For over 50 years, that blessing will last forever in my heart, and I just can't wait just to go home, lay down, and think of Stephen, because that's what I do almost every day. I think of Stephen, especially in the last few years, as much as he suffered, George said it well. He was a tough guy. And he just endured so much, and did it so gracefully, and never complained. And I have to say this to Elizabeth. You gave him life in 1968. You gave him life now. And he's the kind of person that he was because of you. You know, now he's at peace, and it's so heartwarming to know that Elizabeth, Deborah and Andy, Stacey and Bill, John and Sue know how much I love Stephen. And I love you all, and that love will never change. May he be at peace. And Stephen, I love you, always will. And that's it.
Thank you, Michael. And Henry Galt.
As you can all tell, there's a common theme here, and that theme is we all love Stephen. I apologize, I have to take a minute because I only have a 5-minute time limit. That was given to me by my family and the Ballis family. It's hard to compress 76 years into 5 minutes. George and Michael have exciting ways they met Stephen. I met Stephen when our diapers were being changed in nursery school. I don't remember it well, but I'm sure it was fun. One of the things that I thought about today, you know, it's only been 3 years, that's Freudian. It's only been 3 days since Stephen passed away. I've called him 4 times. He hasn't answered, but I'm still trying. Stephen and I shared so much, it's impossible to really talk about all of it. One of the things we shared was dark humor. Stephen taught me that. And that was because we had so many good times, but also we shared a lot of bad times. Bad times in that there were an awful lot of losses, an awful lot of crises. We maintained our friendship because somehow early on we learned how to communicate. He would do things to piss me off. I would do things that would piss him off. Hard to believe, but I did, okay? I think Stephen had some early terrible losses in his life, okay? I had some early terrible losses. It resulted in, because he lost his father so early, I lost my father so early, we made a pact that we would always share Father's Day together, but the only people who could come were people who lost fathers. May sound a little bit selfish, but it really made Father's Day a lot better, okay? We had a good time, and we did that for a long time. Stephen's ability to form friends, to share his warmth, his humor, his generosity, his humanity, his supportiveness were unbelievable. And those are single words, but I think you have to think about the meaning of each word. Okay, it's easy to pass them over, but think about what they mean individually, okay, and how they applied probably to every one of you out there in one way or another. After Sally died and Dayton died, And Stephen called me one night about his aunt, and he was telling me about her symptoms. She was in the hospital, and she had cerebral symptoms, and it was clearly a brain tumor. And I said to him, Steve, I think she's experiencing symptoms of a brain tumor. And then I said to him, by the way, I'm done. Okay, I don't mind helping you with one horrible illness, 2 horrible illnesses, but I'm done now. Okay, I'm not being the Ballis psychiatrist anymore. And of course that wasn't true. I tried to stay in there and help him, support him forever, as he did for me. He helped me through 4 cancers, none of which I had. Okay, but he still helped me through 4 cancers. Okay. Stephen loved life. Okay, loved life in a way I can't explain. And I want to tell just a couple of brief stories, but the one to me that is most meaningful. I had 3 free months from the time I graduated college to the time I started medical school. And the 4 of us, Susan and myself and Stephen and Elizabeth, traveled out west on Travels with Irving, a broken down car where we flew to Denver and then traveled around. And the first night that I remember, Stephen and I were in a hot tub having some drinks, and he looked at me and said, this is life. Now, looking back, we've had a lot of great experiences, and it was just a hot tub and probably a gin and tonic. But I remember it today like I did back then because it meant so much to me that this was life. Being with a great friend and our wives, sitting in this hot tub, something, we were young kids, we didn't have a lot of money, but just being there and enjoying life in a nice hotel, some of which we didn't get because there was a time we pulled into in the car. Have any of you heard of the Monterey Jazz Festival? Well, we pulled in and I had not heard of the Monterey Jazz Festival. Have you ever tried to get a room at the Monterey Jazz Festival when you didn't have any reservations? It wasn't easy. We finally found a hotel. They have a special flooring at this hotel because your feet stick to it. Okay? And the rooms we were at, the doors didn't close. So we slept literally in the beds with our clothes on because we didn't trust the sheets. We had so many great times together. It's hard to describe. The Monterey Jazz Festival, swimming in the Colorado. Who swims in the Colorado? It's cold, okay? And Stephen convinced myself and Elizabeth to go swimming in the tributary of the Colorado. It was really cold, but we had a great time. Stupid human tricks, okay? When the Ballises and the Heislers and the Srolovitzes would get together with our kids, we often did stupid human tricks. What time? Where's my? Ooh, I got time. I got time. So stupid human tricks, and we were all in what is now the beautiful, what do you call that room? Okay. And we were there, and Stephen was late for some reason, and everybody was doing their stupid human trick. And in case you're interested, this was mine. Try doing that sometime. Okay? I can't wait. I can't do it now. There we go. Okay. So that was my stupid human trick. And we're there, and Stephen's not, and we're going around the circle, and the kids are doing theirs, and the parents are doing theirs, and Stephen walks in and says, getting married the first time. Now, I don't know if all of you know that he was married the first time, and I don't want to talk about that because he did a much better job the second time. But all the adults who, of course, knew it, we cracked up because it was so funny. And a lot of the kids, our kids, didn't know that Stephen was married the first time. And they said, what do you mean the first time? It was just Elizabeth. Anyhow, it was extremely funny, still causes laughs today. And Stephen did a much better job the second time, and I and Susan happened to be there. We were in the tent on the Colorado River, sleeping, because we were doing an overnight trip on the Colorado, and Susan kept saying to me, they're getting engaged tonight. I said, you're crazy. They just met. You're not going to get engaged tonight. Susan said, you watch. They're going to come bang on the tent, okay, and they're getting married tonight, or they're engaged tonight. I said, no, they aren't. So sure enough, about 20 minutes later, they come bang on the tent, say, oh, we got news for you. And I said, I'm not going out there. Not that we didn't love Elizabeth, that wasn't it. But I felt Stephen was on the rebound. It was only a couple of months, and sure enough, they got engaged that night. Stephen was correct. It was one of the best decisions he's ever made in his life. So I want to finish, because I'm probably at 4.5 minutes, with two things that really are important, that I think really capture Stephen. And it was, one is very close to the story you told about the boy at school and Stephen greeting him. At Camp Indianola, where I was lucky enough to meet George, Stephen was known as Captain Mountain. That was his nickname. And all of us had nicknames as counselors. Stephen was known as Captain Mountain because, as we all know, he was a pretty big man. And when I was thinking about this, Stephen was a big man in size, but much more importantly, Stephen was a big man in personality, spirit, giving, friendship, warmth. And Stephen was assigned to the waterfront at camp. He was a waterfront counselor. And in the first couple of weeks, he was assigned a young, maybe 10, 11-year-old boy who was afraid of the water. Stephen took that boy in the water for 1 o'clock afternoon swim and committed himself to teaching this kid how to swim. Stephen stayed in the water with him for 5 hours. The kid was intermittently crying, afraid, and Stephen swore to himself and this young boy he wasn't getting out of the water until this kid learned to swim. And Stephen did this. And at 5 o'clock, 5:30, they finally got out of the water, and the young boy had overcome his fear and learned to swim. That was Stephen. And his ability to teach that kid how to swim was a combination of his warmth, his love, his caring, his commitment, and all the good things that we're talking about with Stephen. And that's why I remember that story so well. And the other thing is, if you want to know about Stephen, talk to all of our kids, the Galt kids, the Strolovitz kids, the Heisler kids. Who did I leave out? And the Edelman kids. Talk to them, because they experience the farm. They experience the warmth, the joy, the fun, me Indian dancing, okay, experiences that you just couldn't have in other places. Stephen, I love you, brother. I'm going to miss you, but I will never, ever forget you and will always value our friendship and our relationship.
The dash. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger, and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, when your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Deborah?
Okay, let's see how this goes. It might sound like a squeaky Muppet, but I'll do my best. My dad loved to say he would rather be lucky than smart, so I'm really lucky today I get to speak before Stacey. When I think about different aspects of my life, I often say, as a realtor team, we are the lowest form of high maintenance, and as a family, we're the most fun of dysfunction. Now, as I reflect on who my dad truly was, I can say he was the perfect amount of imperfection. And thankfully, he had my mom by his side for over 53 years to more than make up for the difference. It's hard to talk about my dad and how important he is in my life without it being about both my parents. For me, they've always been one unit, a combined presence, a joint source of love and support and laughter. So Mom, please know you are part of all that I share today, except for the imperfect parts. As a kid, I witnessed my father spend a great deal of time dedicated to improving our community, to the schools, the parks, cultural groups, and Jewish organizations, and to our neighborhood and Chicago at large. What I was too young to understand was that everything he did was centered in his desire to give my sister and me the best possible world to live in. And while those actions were based on his love of his family, he knew that he wanted the world to benefit everyone else that was part of that community. We were all deserving of a better place to live, and he had the vision and leadership to make a significant impact on so many lives. And along the way, he immersed our lives beyond just the basics, waking up early for a bike ride before school, going to the symphony in the middle of a school day for a kids program, driving around the Midwest to watch the Blue Demons play in the tournament. Some may say taking your kid out of school to go to opening day of Empire Strikes Back and a few years later Return of the Jedi, or missing a few days to see the Bears win a Super Bowl may have been imperfect parenting, but as a kid, it felt like a magical, special time. My dad was my everything as a kid, a real girl dad. He was my hero and my protector, and to me, he truly was perfect. Through his vision of creating a better world and his exceptional approach of being a strong leader by listening with compassion and common sense, he gave me an amazing foundation for my own future. And as I grew up and became my own imperfect adult, I saw my father for all that he was, including his flaws, and I loved and respected him even more. Working with my dad, I learned he had great focus, especially while playing Tetris, and leaned more into the bigger picture or larger than life ideas than small details like remembering a bill tucked under a stack of papers. But just having the opportunity to be a part of his team to help build his vision of a better community through development, and at the same time to get to have daily lunch with my dad to talk about so much more than work is far more imperfect than his imperfect time management. I realized that while he enjoyed his professional successes, his passions were driven by having meaningful experiences with his family and friends. So he would go all in when planning for a trip or having a 4th of July firework display. And the imperfections came from not always reading the fine print of a level 1 versus level 4 hike or actually knowing where the fireworks may land. But all I think about is that he wanted the most out of life, even it came with imperfections. My dad loved and was loved by so many. He embraced his friends' children and grandchildren as second father or grandfather, and everyone brought such joy to his life. And when I met Andy, he opened his heart even more and loved Andy not only for who he is and for loving me, but for bringing Oliver, Kalie, and Quincy into his world. He adored being their bonus grandfather, sharing time together and always wanting to hear what was going on in their lives. And he loved getting to give them a hug and hand them a little something to help send them on their next adventure. And what a blessing that we were able to give my dad the end-of-life experience that he wished for. With the amazing assistance of Dr. Diane Rappaport and Dr. Stephen Potts, plus an incredible team of hospice care nurses and caregivers, we provided a safe and comfortable environment. It was so special for him to spend time with friends and family to share so many wonderful memories. And in true Stephen fashion, he defied all odds and brought us together for one last goodbye filled with love and humor. So now we need to talk about love. True, unconditional love. Sorry. My love of Susan Galt's banana cake with chocolate frosting. While we all have attempted to bake her banana cake, we can only get so close to Susan's version. If you've had the privilege of eating a slice of her cake, each bite is the right amount of sweetness and fills your soul with genuine love, no imperfections. And over time, I learned to not hoard the cake, but to share it with my loved ones, to let them experience all the joys a cake can bring, to see the love in their eyes from their first bite. It brings such elation when it appears, and we miss it when it is gone. While my life can be filled with so much love from one single slice, my parents' love is the whole cake. While we all feel heartbroken that my dad is no longer here, I like to think my heart is bursting with all the love, laughter, and joy he brought into our lives. But just for today, I will save the last piece of cake for myself.
Stacey.
Well, I'm going to start by saying what my dad would say if he were here, which is, this is a good-looking group. So here's a story that I always tell when I'm trying to explain my dad to people that have never met him. When I was in second grade and Deborah was in kindergarten, my mom had to go to Charleston for a weekend to visit an old family friend who was not well. It was the very first time she was leaving both of us alone overnight with my dad. They drove to drop us off at school, and then they left to take mom to the airport, and a little over an hour later, there was an announcement over the loudspeaker asking us both to bring all of our belongings and report to the main office. We arrived, lunch boxes and backpacks in hand, to find my dad signing us out of school. We got back in the car, drove directly to the airport, went to the desk where my dad bought 3 tickets to Miami, and the 3 of us flew to Florida with the clothes on our backs. Johnny met us at the airport and took us immediately shopping for swimsuits, shorts, pajamas, toothbrushes, and we spent the weekend surrounded by our snowbirding family, Johnny, Nana and Papa, all the great aunts and uncles, playing in the pool and on the beach, dining at our favorite Miami restaurants. I'm sure there was pumpernicks involved, and returning home in time to greet my mom and go back to normal life. This story tells you everything you need to know about Steve Ballis. One, and most importantly, he was lost without my mom. He hated to be apart from her. And for a guy who was incredibly smart and competent, he lost all sense of what to do and how to do it when she was gone. Their love has been one for the ages, often emulated, never replicated, steadfast and stalwart and unflagging to the end. There are no words for what they were to each other, and really none are necessary. Anyone who has ever been in a room with them together or heard one speak about the other knows that they were deeply best friends, true partners, passionate lovers. 2, family was everything to him, and any opportunity to be with family was an opportunity he was going to take, regardless of inconvenience or cost. 3, he loved fun and adventures. Our lives were filled with both, and he had an uncanny ability to plan for months and focus on details of a trip or a party, but also to be insanely spontaneous and live in the moment. Whether it was abandoning a perfectly good hot dinner on the table and whisking us all to Margie's for hot fudge sundaes instead, or meticulously crafting a spectacular trip abroad with no detail left to chance, my dad was all about making us happy and making amazing memories together. I hope that over the coming days and weeks, we will be sharing those stories with each other, because no one loved to tell a story about family and friends more than my dad. Dishing dirt on his parents or grandparents, detailing the antics of the uncles or our inner circle of friends, the funny things that Deborah and I did that amused him. He could fill any occasion with just the perfect tale to get people laughing, and always with humanity so that no one ever felt like the butt of a joke. Well, except for Henry. My impulse to be a storyteller, I absolutely got from him. When he talked to you, it was just you. He was a very present listener when it was important, and occasionally a selective one when it suited him. But when he loved you, you knew it to the core of your being. He made his family feel like friends, and his friends feel like family, and I know so many of you in this room hold him as one of the most special people you ever met, in part because he let you know him. He didn't hold back. He was generous with himself. There was always more than enough of him to go around. You were never in competition for his affection or attention, because he had plenty for any who deserved it. We all got to experience how his heart expanded to welcome and love Bill and Andy, Oliver, Kalie and Quincy, Peggy and her family, all additions to his life that brought such joy and made him so proud. I know that one of my moments where I realized how special my dad was when I got to college, and about 5 days after I arrived, a letter showed up for me. And, you know, it's college, your dorm room is open all the time, and I read this letter, which was full of his pride and his joy and some thoughts to send me on my way, and I sat in my room and wept, and my door was open, and so people coming down the hallway came in, and I couldn't speak, so I would hand off the letter, and then they were weeping, and then the RA came in. There's like 15 girls weeping in my room. But here's what you need to know about my dad. He sent one of those letters to me, and he sent one of those letters to Deborah, but he also sent them to other people that were very special in his life. I'm pretty sure if I ask some hands to go up right now, there's some of you that got one of those when you got to college. And that's how he was. There was enough of him for all of us. Now, the natural follow-up to the famous Miami boondoggle was the eventual Vegas trips. On the rare occasion Mom would have to go away for business on her own, Dad would call me and Deb to say it was time to go to Vegas. Which is where we learned another thing about Dad. While gambling is always a risk, it can be a calculated one. It's all about being smart so that you can play with house money. He would stake us at the tables, and the advice was always be semi-conservative initially in your choices. You want to play as long as possible, and if you lose that initial stake, walk away. But if you get up a bit, put the initial funds back in your pocket for tomorrow and play with house money when you can be a little more adventurous. One trip, on the last day, he was up $200. On the way out through the casino, he took those winnings and dropped them on black at a passing roulette table. It came up black. He took his newly increased winnings, winked at us, and we left for the airport. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. He'd either give them back their money or have a little bit more for the next trip. Most of you know, Dad has been playing with house money for the past 34 years. Since his first big health scare in 1988, he has defied odds, defied science, often defied logic, and for all of us, that has meant a bonus round over 3 decades long. And because of that awareness, that every day was extra and unpromised, as sad as we are, as much as we're going to miss him, we can only applaud his resilience, his fight, his sheer force of will to stay with us as long as he could, and despite everything that was stacked against him. And he stayed because it was so much fun and such an adventure. And no one is more pissed off than he is right now that we are all together and he's missing it. So here are the promises we all have to make in his honor. First and foremost, to find our chosen partners and make it our mission to keep that love at the forefront of everything we do. To never miss an opportunity to be with family and make memories, whether that family is the one you were born into or the one you have gathered into your heart. To always seek fun and adventure and never let logic get in the way of a good time or facts to get in the way of a good story. And lastly, when given the opportunity to play with house money, go big. On behalf of my whole family, thank you all for loving him, for liking him, and for keeping his memory alive with us. Every good thing we all do, he will be there. If you ever find yourself near a roulette table, play number 23. He'll be watching. Try to get through this for Mom. No, I'm gonna do it. From my mom, Honey Bun. She who must be obeyed always gets the last word. My only regret in 53 years is that I didn't meet you sooner so that I could have loved you longer. And remember always that I love you more. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Dad.
לידה היא ראשית, ופטירה תכלית החיים כמסה הם, כהליכה, צמיחה, משלב לשלב. Birth is a beginning, death a destination, life a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage. The great life journey of Stephen Ballis has now come to its sad conclusion. O God, into your care we entrust the spirit of Stephen Ballis. For you keep faith with your children in death as in life. Sustain all of us, O God, that we may meet with serenity the mysteries that lie ahead for us, knowing that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you, O God, will be with us as a loving friend in whom we put our trust. You are the light of our lives and our hope in eternity. We rise now for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kizoha Harakia Mashirim, Et Nishmat Hayikar Shalanu, Sha'alach La'olamo, Baal Harachamim, Yasirehu Beseter Kenafav La'olamim, Vitor Vitor HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hunachalatom, V'yanuach B'Shalom, Al Mishkavo, V'nomar. Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence with the holy and the pure who glow like the light of the heavens, to Stephen Ballis, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and within the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. We will conclude with Mourner's Kaddish, which is in the back of our handouts. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabah, v'alma divra chirutei v'amlich machutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru, Amen. Yehei shmei rabah mevarach la'olam ulamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitdaleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudashah b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran v'ama v'maru, Amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Please repeat these words after me, speaking to the mourning family, if you would please. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'av Zion v'Yerushalayim. Now go forth in peace unto life. Amen. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone is invited to the North Chapel for a Shiva period. Memorial contributions, that information you'll find on the service folder. And for the many, many people that are joining us online, all that information is on our website. At this time, I ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the family to the North Chapel. Just give them a couple moments to gather themselves and have a drink of water or something, and then everyone can come in and see them. This concludes the service, and this concludes the live stream.